Hey everyone, welcome to The Percussioner. Today we're going to talk about cymbals, and most specifically, we're going to talk about epic crashes, okay? Epic crashes, we all know, are that moment in music when things just build and build and they culminate and there's this one giant like explosion of sound across the orchestra, and it lets everybody know that you've either arrived at some place or that the tension is finally broken. There's lots of different ways that composers use the epic crash, okay? We can think of specific examples like Also Sprach Zarathustra. Mahler uses a ton of them. The beginning of Star Wars, it just simply announces like, hey, here's something epic is about to happen. The very first note, this massive crash, right? So there's a couple of things I want you guys to think about with those crashes. The reason I got to thinking about them is because tonight we're about to perform a season launch. And a season launch for us is usually when they're about to announce next season's schedule. So they put together a concert which takes little snippets of all the programs from next year, and we play all these really cool parts. It's usually a really intense concert, as this one is. And one of the things that we're playing tonight is the very ending of Saint-Saëns' Third Symphony, which is also known as the Organ Symphony, because the organ comes in, obviously. And it is just filled with epic crashes, okay? So it got me thinking about how to create epic crashes, the things that we need to think about when doing it. And so I want you guys to think about this, okay? The first thing I want you to think about is the volume, okay? Volume does not equal epic crash, all right? Oftentimes I see that's what happens, is that we get a cymbal player in there and it's getting big and they want to play a loud crash, so they try to play the loudest crash they can. They just really smash the cymbals together. But it's not about volume, all right? It is about the fullness of sound, okay? We can overplay the cymbals, just like we can overplay a bass drum and overplay a snare drum and all kinds of other instruments. If we start to just use volume to create these things, then we're missing the point entirely. With an epic crash, you often need to think about your form, okay? Now, I use what's called an elliptical circle form, okay? This is just what I was taught. This is what my teachers taught me. I know there are tons of ways to play cymbals. I've seen lots of different ways, and believe me, they all sound good. So this is not about telling you this is the way you should play, but this is the way that got me to execute the sound concept, all right? We're going to talk a lot about sound concept when we talk about cymbals and other instruments, but particularly cymbals. So sound concept is having in your head the sound that you want to create before you create it. And once you start developing that sound in your head, then it becomes easier for you to physically create it. And the only way to create that concept is by listening. You got to listen to tons of recordings of great cymbal crashes. You've got to go see people play cymbals. Go see your local orchestra play and watch the cymbal player. Listen to the cymbals. Listen to how they mix with the orchestra. It might not be the sound that you like, but that's okay. What you're doing is starting to hear them and starting to differentiate what sound you want to create. So again, lots of different techniques. This is simply the technique I use because it's what my teachers taught. So the elliptical circle concept is this, right? Basically, you guys know what a Venn diagram is? A Venn diagram is where circle A contains some information, circle B has some information, and the point where they intersect, C, is what they have in common, okay? And so that is the point where the crash happens. Now, if you watch me closely do a cymbal crash, which I'll show you some in slow-mo, you can really see it, I don't actually do this giant circle. I did that when I practiced, when I was first learning how to crash, just making big, big circles like this. We'll do one here. We'll see if the sound holds up. Okay. The idea is that I want to create a big full sound by using the least amount of effort, the least amount of force as possible. So to do that, I really use that left hand. I really bring it up. This is my left hand. As you can see, I'm kind of holding it a little bit flat, and I'm really bringing it up, okay? Oftentimes I see people really neglect this hand, and they usually just come at it with one hand, sort of like this. You really want to use both hands. The thing that's happening with my right hand, on the other hand, literally, is that I'm dropping it. There's a point where I sort of release the cymbal, and then I'm catching it again. If you practice this, it's possible you might drop the cymbal, and that's okay. They're pretty sturdy, really. But that's how loose you want to be when the impact is made, okay? I'll show you a few slow motion of me doing some of these epic crashes, and you can kind of get the idea of the form. But it's really the sound concept that is the most important. Finally, timing, okay? So the timing is what makes it epic. And if you're sitting back there counting and counting and counting, and 1, 2, 3, 4, crash, and you're not really breathing with the orchestra, you can kind of miss the point. We talked about that in the prelude to the Afternoon of a Faun, right? That I can't simply play the crotales just on the beat. You actually have to listen and be with them. And usually when a cymbal crash is epic, the orchestra sort of takes this big expansive breath right before it. And you want to be right with that breath and come in right on time. Finally, I want you to think about this. The only way to get good at cymbals is to practice them. It's really annoying. They're really loud. They're not very fun to practice because they're heavy. So I would volunteer to play crash cymbals anytime you get the chance, you know, in your band and your orchestra or whatever. Take that chance and learn how to play the cymbals. You've got to spend time just making some crashes. It's best to try to go someplace away from everybody because no one loves hearing you practice your crash cymbals. But definitely that's the only way to really get good at cymbals, is to do lots of it. Put in some earplugs when you do it. If you're going to spend an extended amount of time smashing cymbals together, you definitely want some earplugs. But anyways, we'll take a look at my crashes in slow-mo for the Saint-Saëns. You can get an idea of the concept. And then we'll also just talk about the various sound concepts, right? Different ways in which we play the cymbals, what we want to hear from those epic crashes.
Hey, so one of the problems with our setup at Town Hall is it's impossible to get a front-on shot of me playing cymbals. So I thought I'd do that for you here. Just pay attention to how my left hand is moving up, right? We wanted to get both hands involved. And the right hand is literally just dropping it, okay? And I've made a huge no-no. I've got zippers and buttons today, which I wouldn't do in this situation. So that's all right. We're just going to let them ring.